Good morning, 9:03, Monday 11/2/2020. This is CIS 2400. I hope you guys are doing good. We're making progress for the most part. I have a few announcements that I want to make this morning, and I am a little bit tiny disappointed because I thought that we are giving you all the opportunities and probably enough resources for you to do your work, but I still keep seeing some of you seem not to be putting the effort. I'm not going to say that you're not because I don't know where you're working from, but when you present your work, it shows that you're probably not putting in the effort. A couple of things. Always try as much as possible to make sure that you're submitting your assignments on time. This is a way of respect. I give you a whole week to work on your assignments. I provide as much information and input as possible. We have provided means of you reaching out to us. You can either use the phone, the email, discussion board, your colleagues, everything. And still, some of you are submitting what is considered substandard work. So that is a little bit disappointing. Also, make sure that you're doing the right assignments. Everything is on Blackboard. It's very well structured, hopefully. And if you have any issues, you can always reach out to your professors. It's a little bit, let me use the word interesting, that somebody sends a professor a note and says, I don't know how to do this assignment. I asked my friends and they're also confused, and therefore I'm sending this out. And my big question is, why are you asking your colleagues about an assignment when your professors are available for that? So it just, I don't know how the thinking is like that. So usually you can ask your friends if they have issues and your professors are available, please reach out to them, because this is the same that's going to happen when you go to work in the organization. You're going to be given a project. You might not know exactly how to work on it. You ask your colleagues, and then what? So if you have an issue, contact your boss. Maybe if there is something that you're working on and nobody in the company knows how to do it, they can get a consultant to help you in doing that. So I don't know why some of you have that fear of always reaching out. Also, when you're submitting your work, remember we have a schedule to follow. If you are sending me an email at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. on Sunday night, I have said that many times. That surely shows no initiative. You cannot be waiting until Sunday to work on an assignment, because what you're doing is you're taking a big risk, and sometimes that might have worked for you in the past, but there is a chance it's not always going to work, because you're not guaranteed I'm going to be online at 11 p.m. And when I wake up the following morning, or when I see that email at night when I'm doing my grading, what you're telling me to do is don't discuss that assignment in the upcoming class, don't finish your grading, wait for me to submit this assignment. So it kind of is a little bit not showing the initiative. So always start your work. So in case you have issues, you have enough time to recover from that. And this is not only in this class, but in all your other classes. And I'm not very sure. I think it's part of procrastination. And sometimes I do that. People always want to wait until the last minute, but you have to always know that you're taking a risk when you do that. So be aware of that. So I also ask you, if you are going to be voting, there is going to be extra credit for that. And some of you have been doing that. So like I always say, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I cannot do. And I was actually volunteering the whole of, not whole of, a few days last week. I think it was on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So it was a very good experience for me. And it's good, I think, when people come in to vote and they see somebody who looks like them who is doing the supervision. So that was the whole idea about me doing it, because you're trying to make the change. Sometimes we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. So if you're able to vote, go ahead and do that and send me some information that shows that you did it. Take somebody out there to vote or something close to that. There's some extra credit for that. So that being said, we are almost coming towards the end of the semester. So this is week 11, 11.2 to 11.8. We're going to be working on chapter 9, system development and project management. This will be our last chapter. And then next week, we're going to be working on reviewing the exam, and then we'll have the exam. So probably on Monday, we are going to review exam like we did last time, and then from Wednesday you'll have the exam open from Wednesday, I think, to either Saturday or something like that. And then after that, you'll be a free bird to fly and go do what you love to do. Okay, so any questions so far?
No.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to review the assignment from last week, and let me see who is here. I'm gonna check this really quick, so give me a minute. Hector, do you mind if I use your assignment as an example?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna share this, and there are also very other students who did very well. But the reason why I'm sharing this assignment is so that you can see that there are actually students who are working on the assignments and they are able to do what is expected of them. So let's see whether we can this thing up. So I thought I provided a lot of information in the previous video, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this is because I know we have not gone through database design class. Some of you will go through this, some of you might have gone through that. So I'm trying to provide as much information as possible. And basically all what I'm expecting you to do is go through the assignment, follow the instructions, and at least do some of the work. So most of the ones who submitted something that was close to what I was looking for, they ended up getting full credit. And some of you did not submit exactly what I was looking for, but it was close to. So they also got full credit. So this is an example of an assignment by one of your colleagues, and you can see we have all the tables that you're talking about. So this assignment was supposed to be done in Microsoft Access. There was a file in Excel that I said is how that company was using the database, and they were supposed to transfer that data into Microsoft Access because that is a database management system. So I gave you some hints. I provided you with the tables and the relationships and all that. And all what you're supposed to do is kind of like recreate that. So if you don't have enough time to even watch the video and recreate the assignment, that is very telling. So this is what I was expecting you to have, at least have some of these tables. And basically what I was doing is I'll come back to the database here and I look at the relationship. And if I'm able to say that you have at least what you're calling the entities or the tables, there's actually something missing here. So bring that one here and click create. Okay, so you establish those relationships like that. And this is a table that has, these are what you're calling the field names. Okay, so entity refers the table. And then we have the field names. Anytime that you see the key here, it means that's a primary key. And you set that up when you create a table. And then you establish the relationships. If you have the relationships, then you're going to be able to create the reports and the queries. So if you had several tables like this and you had the relationships and you had maybe one or two reports down here, I gave you full credit. And that is because you should have been able to do that if you had watched the video that we posted and talked about last week. So there was a question about the business rules, and I said, don't worry about that. If you're already looking at the final product, which is right here, you have already established that. We talked about entity relationship diagram. I said, don't worry about that. You have already established that if you have this table right here in front of you. So by clicking on a table like this, you'll be able to see the table right here, or what you're calling the entity. And if you go to the design, which we did some time back, you can see the field names right here and the data type. And you have this icon here that represents the primary key. So primary key, we said, is a field that is used to uniquely identify a record. Okay, so you had all these. The Excel table had a few of them, but I explained that you have to create others. So once you've created the tables, then usually you'll go to the database view and then you populate. So you provide the information, some of it was provided, and then after that you can create some queries. And what you do is you click on create and then you go to the query wizard. Now if you did that, well and good. If you did not create any query, I did not penalize you for that. This is not a database design class, but for you to do that, I always say it is always good to use a design wizard, and then you go ahead and you specify what you're doing. You want to create a simple query, you click OK, then you select the tables that you're going to be using. So field that you want, if you want both of them, go ahead like that. If you want another table or another entity to be included. You select from here and on like that. So that was that part. Then you come back and you create a report for me. In the same way, you're creating the reports from right here. Okay? You go to create, and then you have the report wizard. So the wizard kind of guides you. It gives you like some hints of what you're going to be doing. It's the easier one to do that. You select the table and then the field that you want. If you're creating from more than one table, you do the same thing and on like that. A little bit more straightforward. So if you just give me one, you got full credit. So that's what I was looking for in this assignment. And I'm not sure why some of you did not do that well, but I had some of you who did very well, and please keep up that good job. Any questions on that? Anybody home?
No question.
Okay, so I had a few students who did very well, so that's just one example, at least to show you that there are people who are doing the work. And remember what I said, you're not competing with the people in your class, you're competing with everybody in the world. Now we have the flat world, so people can access the resources from all over the world. Okay, so the other assignment was on the
Wait, what did you say? Did you say the flat world? FLAT?
yes, FLAT, flat world. You know what that means?
I'm not going into it right now.
Okay, so and who is this? I can't see
Miss
here.
Mboma.
Okay, so that's a conversation for another day. But anyhow, so flat world is a book by Michael Friedman, New York Times, and he wrote a
Yes,
book.
I know.
Very good. Okay, so let's keep moving here. So where was I? So that's that part. So I was going to talk about the discussion, which was supposed to be on voice thread. Some of you did very well also. They actually even went ahead and gave the description of what is a CRM, customer relationship management. Now, a little bit disappointed also. Most of you are always on the internet. You're always doing Instagram, TikTok, and all that. And yet, you're not contributing to the discussion. So I'm not sure how to explain that. So for the the discussion was on the customer relationship management, and you're supposed to give 3 examples of why companies use that. I gave you the location of the information, the same video where you could find that information, and still some of you did not do the work. So uh, I don't know how to put it. Anyway, so some of you gave me some good examples. Marketing, you want to track your customers. You want to make sure that you're tracking the sales, return customers, customers who don't return. Also, you have when customers go online and they put things in their shopping basket, you want to make sure that you know why they are not finishing or checking out, and on like that. So those are some of the techniques that you can use to help make sure that the company is used to the CRM. Okay, so for this week, learning module week 9, the discussion is going to be the regular discussion. So I understand some of you have to do a lot of work to prepare for the discussion. So I'm going to save you that and just go through ahead and make the regular discussion and why is gathering business requirements a challenge for most projects. So basically before the end of the class, we'll talk about what is business requirement. We're going to be talking about how to design information systems and how to work on projects. And before you can design or work on a project, it is important that you know what that project is going to be doing. So how do you know what that project is going to be doing is you can carry out some interviews. So you can ask people in the company, what do you want that project to be doing? So that's part of what you're calling business gathering business requirements. So you want to talk with people who work in the organization. Sometimes you can observe what they're doing. Sometimes you can give them a questionnaire. Sometimes you can do what's called brainstorming. You bring everybody together and you ask them questions about what is it that you're doing now and how do you think this new information system is going to help you move the new program. So like for instance, if you have checkout registers, the regular ones, and you want to put the automated one. So you can ask some of the employees what are some of the things that they need. They think that the new checkout register should have, how should it be used? That's part of what you're calling the business requirement. Now, we're saying it's a challenge for most of the companies. And some of the reasons why it's a challenge is because sometimes some of the users might not exactly understand how the new system is going to be working. Also, some of the challenges because of what is called resistance to change. People don't like changing, and anytime that they see a system coming up, some of the systems are going to be making them redundant, some of them are going to make them lose their jobs, so people resist that and they don't provide information. Sometimes because of the language barrier. Some people cannot communicate very well, and when you're asking them questions, they cannot respond. So those are some of the challenges that most of the companies face, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's all what you're going to be saying. Give me 2 or 3 reasons. I'm going to leave this one open. I'm not going to require you to give me 3. Just give me a few, and you should be fine with that. Apply your knowledge. It's also very straightforward. And what I've done is you have the questions right there, and they're coming from your book. And also, I provided the template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see whether I can share this template really quick with you so you can know exactly what you're going to be working on in this assignment. And give me 1 minute. I'm going to share this with you. This application window, apply your knowledge, share that. So right here, I hope you can see that. Okay, perfect. So apply your knowledge is confusing coffee and use the following template. A few examples are provided. So basically what we are saying is before you design an information system, you need to set up kind of like what you're calling the business rules. Okay, so some of those business rules are provided. So you're told, like for instance, all employees must have a unique employee ID. So you're creating a database and you're told all employees should have a unique employee ID. So the way the question is structured, and you can read that, is asking you that, are there any issues with the above requirement? So this is part of what you're calling requirement. Write yes or no below. So we have what, 8 requirements, and I provided some of the answers so you can kind of like see what is expected of you. So all employees must have a unique employee ID. So you're going to be creating a database for a coffee shop, and requirement is that when you create that database or that table, everybody who is an employee should have a unique employee ID. So is that something that is good, or is that something that has some problem? We say it has no problem. So why is it? There are no issues with the requirement. In fact, it's a good requirement since each employee must have a unique employee ID. So remember, employee ID will be the primary key in that database. You're saying a primary key is used to uniquely identify what? A record, okay? So you don't need to write anything over here. We come back here, we say the system must track every employee hours worked based on an employee's last name. The system must track employees' hours worked based on employees' last name. So if you have a system that is used to track employees, and you're trying to track how many hours employee worked, and you're only using the employee's last name, we're saying that's going to be a problem, correct? So we say yes, there's a problem. Now, what is the issue? So can somebody try just to tell me what they think is going to be wrong with this system if you're only using the employee's last name to track how many hours they have worked? Somebody?
There may be more than one employee with the same last
Beautiful.
name.
Very good. So there must be more than one employee with the last name. So what should we use? How can we fix that problem? Somebody else or the same person? How can we fix that problem?
Do something else.
Like what?
Mm, the like a number or
What kind of number?
the employee number, the employee ID number.
Exactly. Why is that so?
It's unique to each employee.
Very good. So that I'm looking for specific answers. That's what you should always strive when you're providing responses. Be specific. Hit the point, nail on the head. Let people say that. Okay, so if we have more than one employee who have the last name, that's going to be very confusing for the system. Okay, so it's a problem. You tell me that, and then you explain to me how can you resolve that. So use a field that is unique, like the employee ID. Okay, and then number 3, employees must be scheduled to work a minimum of 8 hours per day. And you say any issues? Yes, the requirement is too detailed. So that's how we specify that. Okay, and on like that. So you have some others one here that you have to figure out, and it's not complicated, so you can follow those examples. I think you're only doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, kind of 5.5 or something like that. Okay, so that's what you're going to be doing. Populate here with your information. Any questions on that? Did you log in and disappear? Anybody home?
No questions.
Okay, so that's what we're doing for this week. So if no question, let's see what is to cover for this week. Okay, so you have a whole week to do this thing. So anything that you guys think we should change before the semester is over? Maybe as I share this.
No.
Okay, so this is a important topic, and you may never actually use some of these concepts directly, but you might be involved in one way or another. And we have been talking about management information system. So this is the last chapter that we're looking at, and this chapter actually helps us to understand how we develop the information systems. Because we've been talking about using a tool, or what you're calling the information systems, to help us manage our organizations. So how do we develop those tools? So this is the topic, the chapter that walks us through that process of developing information system. So some of the learning outcomes is you're going to be looking at the 7 phases or the steps of the system development lifecycle. If you are CSB major or minor, you probably will come back to this. The same way, some of you will be taking a class in project management and will be revisiting some of these concepts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and cover the first section of this in this lecture, and then the second section, project management, I'm going to try and cover it in the next class. And hopefully I'm going to post both videos and you can go back and review them at your own convenient time. So usually we have the system development lifecycle. Okay, so when you're developing a project, there is a cycle or a number of steps that you have to follow that have been established. You don't have necessarily to do that, but people who are very good, like chefs, they'll tell you that if you want to make a good meal, there's a number of steps that you have to follow. Correct? Do I get an amen?
Amen.
Okay, yeah, so there's the right time that you put the onions, if you're using that, the oil and the spices and all that, and you do the tasting as you go on between that until the food comes back. Some people say you need to keep the food simmer a little bit, don't eat it when it's too hot, blah, 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 blah. So usually we have a few information. So the multi-million, I'm going to read this a little bit. So the multi-million-dollar Nike supply chain management. So after taking this class this far, now when you start reading, you should be now making the connection, because now I'm hoping that you're familiar with the language of the subject. So when you see SEM, you know that is supply chain management. What is that talking about? Supply chain management. So you're talking about Nike and their products. They are making the products all the way, some of them in China, Taiwan, Vietnam, all the way down like that. That's maybe not where they're getting the raw materials from. So they have to get the raw materials to those locations. When they finish producing them, they have to ship those products back to the US and they have to sell them. The customers get them. If they have an issue with them, they go back to the store and on like that. So all that process is what you're calling supply chain management. So they have a system. They say the multi-million-dollar Nike supply chain management system failure is legendary. So they had a system that they were working on and it failed. As Nike CEO Philip Knight famously said, this is what we get for our $400 million. So this is a big project. Nike partnered with I2 to implement an SEM system that never came to fruition. I too blame the failed implementation on the fact that Nike failed to use the vendor's implementation methodology and it. So remember I said there are some established processes that you can use when you are implementing an information system or when you are working on an information system. So Nike blamed the failure on faulty software, and they give you some references you can go about and read about that. So why is that important? It's difficult to get an organization to work if its systems do not work. Some of you have had problem with Blackboard, with Banner. If the systems are not working, it becomes very difficult for us to be able to do our work. In the information age, that's where we are now, software success or failure can lead directly to business success or failure. And we have seen that on Black Fridays, some of the companies' systems fail, the websites are not working, and that leads to us because people cannot go online and shop. So now companies are actually preparing for that because they know that come Black Friday or Black Monday, most people are going to be shopping online. So they have to make sure that they test their systems to make sure that they can handle that increased demand in terms of more users accessing the resources. So companies rely on software to drive business operations and ensure that work flows throughout the company. So we talked about the workflows. As more and more companies rely on software to operate, so do the business-related consequences of software success and failures. So the potential advantage of successful software implementation provides firms with significant incentive to manage software development risk. Okay, so this is a little bit of talking about that, understanding how the software is done, development or the system development lifecycle is going to be very important. It helps organizations avoid potential software development pitfalls and ensure that software development efforts are successful. So a few key terms that we should understand is what you're calling conversion. This is a term that is borrowed from contemporary English, process of transferring information from a legacy system to a new system. So when we talk about the legacy system, it's like when you go to, for instance, auto repair shop, they're using manual systems. So when you walk in there and you say you want oil change, they don't have anything on the system. They're using paper. So they have a book that they open, they put your name in there, and then they do your work, and then they're using a calculator and they print you a handwritten receipt and on like that. And they have like filing cabinets. That's what you call a legacy system. If they're going to be using computer systems, or information system and they're transferring that operation to an information system, that's what you're calling conversion. Okay, so legacy system is an old system that is fast approaching or beyond the end of its useful life within an organization. Filing cabinets, most of the companies still use that, but most of the companies are transitioning to what you're calling database management systems. So the assignments that we have actually been doing, they're actually a modern way of managing data and information in the organizations. And we talk about the files in the computer and we talk about the folders, which is actually a concept that is borrowed from the old filing systems. You go to most of the offices in the old days, they used to have cabinets. Actually, like even in the medical doctor, some of them actually do that. Like you go to a doctor's office and they have all these files back there where they go pull your record and on like that. But now most of them are transitioning to what you're calling electronic medical records. So off-the-shelf application software supports general business processes, does not require any specific software. So this is a software that everybody can use. So like Microsoft Word, Excel, Access, those are general. You go to a store, you buy it, and you can use it. Customization is whereby you have to make some changes. So there's some software that are specific to some of the organizations. Okay, so if you go to IBM or even if you go to, like, for instance, Central, we have our banner. So we have made some changes to that banner system, and the way the information is structured, it might be a little bit different from when you go Chapel Hill or when you go to Duke and look at the system that they use to manage their resources. So software development lifecycle is called the SDLC. This is a very popular concept. You'll come across it. Is the overall process for developing information systems. So it starts all the way from the planning, you go all the way like that. And these are the 6 stages. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, actually 7. So you have the planning, you go through the analysis, you go through the design, you go through the development, you go through the testing, and then implementation, and then you go to maintenance. Okay, so system development lifecycle involves these steps. If you are a CSB major or CIS minor, you need to know that. And you might go for a job interview and they ask you to name these processes. Okay, so at least have an idea. But when you're talking about system development lifecycle, you have to go through these steps, usually in that order. Okay. Any questions?
No.
So we'll briefly go through each of these. So in the planning stage, and usually what is going to happen is we're talking about these steps. They are not only specific to software development. There are very many other life activities or even organizational activities whereby you use them. Anytime you're working on a project, you're going to be using these steps. Okay? Even before somebody does like auditing, you still have to go through a variation of this because you have to do some planning. How are you going to be doing that? You have to do some analysis. Okay? Then you go ahead and design how you're going to be carrying that process. Then you implement it. Then you test. Then you do the implementation. You maintain, and on like that. So in the planning, you use what is called brainstorming. Okay? So brainstorming is where you bring in people and you ask them for ideas, okay, without criticizing them. Then you post all those ideas in one location, and then after you have gone through several iterations, then you go back and start doing the elimination, and you come up with the best ideas. So that helps you to be able to set what you're calling the scope of the project. So what is it that exactly you want to do? So you do that during the planning, and then the end result of planning is what you're calling a project plan. Okay? So you end up with that plan, and then from there you go through the analysis. So in the analysis is whereby you're going to be gathering the business requirements for the system. What exactly is this system supposed to be doing? Okay? So if you have that example that I gave you of mom and pop auto repair shop where they're using the filing system and they want to convert that into an information system, then you'll have to gather some business requirements, and you're going to be interviewing maybe the owner of the store. You might be interviewing the employees who work there. What kind of data do they collect about the customers? What about them? So you might have to keep information about the employees, information about how the cars that are brought in there, information about the owner, all the way like that. And then you define any constraints that are going to be associated with the system. Okay? That's in the analysis. Then you go to the design, any technical architecture. So this is something that you're going to be putting down on paper. You have not started doing any work yet on the system. And this is usually problem that very many people go into. When you're given an assignment, you jump into the assignment before you have actually done a little bit of walling thinking and designing. So, especially for programming, you should never start writing code before you have thought about what you're going to be writing about. And there is what you call a pseudocode, which is usually like you should be able to write down what the system is going to be doing in human readable language before you can convert that into what's called the machine language or the computer code. And then you go ahead and design the system models. Okay, then you get now into the development. Okay, you building. This is the develop. Okay, this is now writing the code if you're going to be writing the code. Okay, and then you do the testing. You should always do the testing before you put the product out there for the users to start working on it. Write the test conditions and then perform the system testing, you implement, and then you maintain. So this section here gives you more specific details about each of the phase. Okay? So we have the planning phase, then you have change agent is a person or event that is at risk for implementing major changes for a system to meet the business changes. And then you have the brainstorming. So most of the companies will have a change agent, somebody who is in charge of the project or who wants to bring the change and bring a lot of hopefully positive the company if you are the change agent, because usually people are looking for somebody who's going to come from outside and change how things are done. You bring in new ideas, more innovative way of doing things. Okay, so this is a little bit about the meetings. Some people have been to meetings that are very boring. So if you're going to be in charge of a project and you have to call meetings, make sure you follow some of these ideas here. Set the agenda, make sure everybody has the agenda before the meeting, start and end on time. Make parking lot available on of the topic. So if there's something that needs to be discussed, you can, and it's not in the agenda, you can do that after the meeting. Then always have call action plan. What are we going to be doing at the end of this meeting or until we meet next time? So for our class session, actually, we started the other way around. So we started with the action plan as the assignment that we talked about, and then now we are hopefully going to the agenda. So PMI is a very important organization and is the leading project management organization in the world. So if you want to improve or increase your value, your competitive advantage, there is actually an exam that you can take once you take the project management class. That's called the CAPM or EMP, and that certifies that you are good at managing projects. So when you go for a job interview or if you're looking for promotion, that will come in handy. But they define what a project is, because we have had this term, I'm working on a project, term project, but they give you a specific definition of what a project is. Probably you may never be asked this question somewhere, but it's good to know what a project is. So it's nothing else but a temporary activity. So a project is temporary. What does that mean? It has a specific beginning and a specific end. Now, that might mean that a project can take 2 hours, or it can take 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. If you go to NASA and you look at their website, they have some projects that have been going on since the 1960s. Okay, so project can extend for a very, very long time. So it's supposed to be used to create a unique product, service, or result. So no project is like any other. You might be involved in construction industry and you're building houses, and what you realize is that even if you're in the housing industry and you're building single family homes, there's not any one house that looks like the other one. Technically, when you're working with projects, so it's a unique activity undertaken to create a unique product or service. It has a specific beginning and a specific end. Okay, and then project management, we're talking about the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities in all the way like that. So a plan is that formal approved document that manages and controls the entire project. So remember, we're talking about this because we talked about the planning phase. The end result of the planning phase is a project plan. And the project plan is going to include a project scope, describes the business need. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And how are you going to be able to solve that? So you have the justification for the project, and then you have the requirements. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the requirements. So the analysis is the firm analyzes its end user business requirements and refines the project's goals into defined functions and operations. So business requirements are the specific business requests the system must meet to be successful. Remember the assignment you're working on? You're saying that the requirement is that we are going to be using what? We want to track every employee by using employee ID. That's the requirement. This is what you want the system to do. In the mom and shop and pop shop, you want to be able to track a customer. You want to be able to know anytime somebody comes for what? Oil change. Because down the road, if you're doing oil change 3,000 miles, you might want to send your customers a coupon when their time is almost. And you think maybe it's 3 months, but when you think they need another oil change, so you can send them a coupon and tell them, hey, you come back for oil change, we'll give you oil change for this much, maybe we'll do your tire rotations for half the price. So you need to have a system that is used to help you track that information. So that's part of what you're calling the business requirement. Okay. Remember the same question we come back to. The CRM must track all customer inquiries by product, region, and sales representative. This is very close to the assignment that we had last week. Okay, so some of the methods for gathering business requirements is you conduct joint application development where employees meet sometimes for several days to define or review the business requirement for the system. But remember the assignment is asking you the problem. So if people are meeting sometimes for a couple of days, that might be a problem sometimes. Okay? Not everybody might be available to meet on all those days. So you have an issue there. Interview individuals to determine current operations and current what? Issues. You're doing interviews and you're doing individual interviews. What are some of the problems that you might have when you're interviewing people? Okay, think about that. Compile the questionnaire to survey employees to discover the issues. Now, probably you have received a questionnaire at home, sometimes online. It's not everybody who responds to the questionnaire. Sometimes they leave questions blank. Sometimes they ignore everything. Sometimes they misrepresent the information. So see the issues, make observations to determine how current operations are performed. Okay, so you are the one who is going, maybe you're a business analyst. Actually, that's a good point, because usually what's happening is people who gather the requirements are what you call the business analysts. So these are people who understand the business and also they understand a little bit of computer programming. Okay, so they are the go-between between the users and the programmers. So if you are the business analyst and you're making the observations, sometimes we know that when people are being observed, they tend to act differently. Okay, so you might not be getting the actual picture when you're observing. So that's another problem. Review business documents to discover reports, policies, and how information is used throughout the organization. The reports might not always be available. Okay? So some people might not be willing to provide that. So those are some of the issues that you might encounter when you're going through what's called the requirements gathering, business requirements gathering. See your discussion responses right here. So structure them in such a way that they're going to make sense. So requirements management is a process of managing the change of the business requirements through a project, and on like that. Any questions?
No.
Are we making progress? Maybe, maybe not.
Yes.
You might come across what's called the process modeling, via CSP major maybe. So this is graphically representing the process that capture, manipulate, store, and distribute information between a system and its environment. And basically what you're saying is with the process modeling, it's like, for instance, when you go to a store and you buy something, that information has to be put in the system. Where does that information flow? What is the interaction between the different systems that are used in managing that data? So you can use pictorial representation of that process. And before you can design an information system, you need to have something like that. So this is an example of that. And I think we looked at that previously. Look at the data flow diagram and how that information is structured in the system. So if you're registering, it's an example of how that information is presented, because you want to make sure that if somebody is registering online, you want to make sure that they are actually what? Eligible to do that. Okay, they can register for that class based on maybe their standing and on like that. And in the old days, I don't know whether you still do that. When you're registering for a class, they used to go and pull up your file and they look at your curriculum and see how many classes you have taken, and then they tell you, okay, you can take this, you can't take that. Now we are doing that through the system. When you go to register, the system should know that you should be able to take that class or you should not be able to take the class. So that's how you represent that. You might hear about the computer-aided software engineering. So this is actually a that you can use to help you do that. Okay. So note about that case, computer-aided software engineering. You might have heard about computer-aided manufacturing. So those are type of the systems that are used for helping you develop information system. Okay, so problem identification, project management. This is some of the problem that some of the companies, before launching a project, you should be able to think about that. And let me see, design, what happened, the design, description of the desired features and operations of the system, including screen layout, business rules, process diagrams, pseudocode, and other documentation. Okay? So pseudo, people have like a pseudonym. It's a fake name. So the same thing with pseudocode. It's not like real code. So when you look at the computer programming languages and you look at the actual language, before you get there, you should be able to write in simple terms what the system is going to be doing. Okay, so this is an example of what you're calling a technical architecture. Now we have heard about somebody who is doing architecture. What they do is they draw pictures or pictorial representation of buildings. So here we're having the same thing, but now for what? For IT. And we're looking at this is our network. That's what's going to be configured. Okay, Ethernet network. In the network, we have firewall here, and then we have cloud. So that's to represent the internet usually. So this is how our system is going to look like before we actually go ahead and implement it. So we have it mapped down. Now we can go ahead and start doing what? Implementing. That's what we do through the design phase. Okay. So you kind of like lay it down and then you can go ahead and now start doing the actual implementation. And you're using what's called the graphical user interface, okay, the icons. So this is an example of entity relationship diagram, because remember we had mentioned something about in the assignment about you creating an entity relationship diagram. And what you see right here, was that actually, can you see that? Okay, that's actually good. So what we see here is shipping is an entity or a table. And then this represents the relationship. So those arrows that we are creating, you can represent them like this. So this is what you are calling an entity relationship diagram. You are supposed to do this in the assignment, but we skipped that step because we have not done this before, and I didn't want to test you on something that you have not done. But this is actually how it looks like. So those tables that we are looking at, and you are seeing that relationship, this is how they're supposed to be represented. So we have database tool here, and we have the relationship. Let me see whether I can share that back with you real quick. And pardon me for this. Share the application window. Done. Share that. So I'm hoping you can see that. Okay, so you see this arrow here represents the relationship. So you have one table that's called the order. It has the field names. We have the primary key, and then we have another entity or table called the order detail. It has two primary keys, and these are all three field names. Now this is the relationship. This is the relationship. So this is now when you're doing the implementation. Now in the design, this is how it looks like. So I'm hoping that now you can make that connection. Reading, share that. Okay, so you see we have one table here, another table here, or entity, and then we have the relationship. So what this means is that shipping. So a customer, we're going to be shipping items to the customer. We're going to be shipping items to the customer, and there is that relationship here. So this means one item must belong to a customer, but a customer can have more than one item. Okay. Now, this customer entity has a number of field names. So there is a name, there is an address, and there is an email for the customer. And then this customer table is linked to items. So a customer can have more than one item, but an item can only belong to one customer. Okay, and on like that. So this is how you represent that. Okay? And we have this entity relationship diagram here showing the relationships. So this is something that if you're a CSB major, you'll come back to it. If you're not a CSB major, you're going to be using database, definitely. Okay, if you're accounting finance, you're going to be using database because you're going to be having information about the customer. So when you see that table, or you have a form whereby you're entering information, remember this is how it was designed. Okay, and you might actually be the one who's going to be telling them that we need to keep information about the customer. So we need the name of the customer, we need the address, we need the email, we might need the age, might need the credit score of the customer, and on like that. So that's what we mean by entity relationship diagram. So once you have this, now you can transfer that and start doing the development. So what we did in the assignment is actually we went directly to the development. Okay, I started designing the table. Now we were using different languages. Okay, you can use different languages to design. We were using the SQL, okay, SQL. That's what you should use with the Microsoft Access. We didn't say that because we're using graphical user interface, moving icons here and there, but there is actually a code in the background that is used to do that. Okay, so these are some of the software that you can use. You have C, C++, Ada, Java, MATLAB, all the way down like that. So you don't need to know a lot about this, but at least depending on which field you are, R is a good software to know. A little bit of JavaScript might help, and a little bit of Java too. If you're a CSB major, at least make sure that you're good familiar with C++ and Java, and Python is actually very good now. We also have Scratch, so you see different words meaning different things. Scratching somebody's door, so scratch. A visual language that is ideal for learning programming. So I told you information system uses the language you're already familiar with. Spark, streaming data analysis, and on like that. So this is the development of the programming languages. In the old days, when we used to have programming, we had what you call the first generation. You had to convert everything to zeros and ones when you write the computer program. Now you don't have to do that. We have the fourth and fifth generation languages, whereby you're only able to actually use language that's very similar to the language that we use for communicating. After you do the development, then you go ahead and do the testing. Okay, so bringing all the project pieces together into a special testing environment to eliminate errors and bugs. So you might have seen it's very common in the auto industry. They do testing for their cars before they bring the car out. the market. It's very, very important. So you do the testing to make sure that the project is working properly, and then you eliminate defects as much as possible. And we have some of the rules that you can use. We have different testing formats. We have the alpha, assess if the entire system meets the design requirements of the users. So like if it's you're making a car, you take it through the crash test, and then you see you have a dummy, and you see if the dummy is protected, whether the car can withstand the impact, and on like that. Development, you test the system to ensure it's bug free. So the concept of the bug, when you get some time, go ahead and check where did we get the bug from, because actually this is a real animal. So that there's a story behind the first computer programs and how there was actually a real bug that was making the computer program not work. And that's how they end up with the bug concept. So we say this computer has bugs and program has bugs and things like that. Integration, you're bringing everything together, different parts together, system testing, user acceptance testing, and then unit testing. So unit is individual pieces. Okay, so some people do that. Especially if you're developing software like Microsoft Word, you have a piece for printing, you have another piece for attaching document, you have another piece for opening a new file. So sometimes you want to make sure that those disparate pieces are working together, working separately before you bring everything together for testing. So about that. And then you go ahead to what you're calling the implementation. Okay, so you can have different techniques that you can use for the implementation. You have parallel implementation. Use both the legacy and the old system until all the users verify that the new system functions correctly. So you have some people who are using what? The old system, and others are using the new system. Or you can do what's called the plunge. You discard the old system and everybody moves to the new system. That's not very good actually. Okay? Because if there is a problem, then everybody will have to be kicked out. You can do the pilot, assign a small group of people to use the new system until it is what verified to work correctly, and then the remaining users migrate the new system. This is usually very, very popular. Or you can also have the phased. So install the new system in phases, for example, Batman, until it is verified to work correctly. So this is another way that you can do it. So I think we moved to a new banner or something like that, new system, and they might have used a phased implementation. So any of this is going to work, and all depends on the policies of the companies. Any questions?
No.
Okay, the last part is the maintenance. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining the system, and you have the corrective maintenance, make the system changes to repair design flaws, including errors or implementation, or you can do preventive maintenance. So you make the system changes to reduce the chance of future system failures. And these are some of the examples that you can generate. So read a little bit about that. And then the last part talks about the system development methodology. So this is kind of like to show you how this is being done. So we have what you're calling the firewall, the waterfall. And remember, we talked about the 7 steps. So what this means is we start the planning, and once you finish the planning, then you go to the analysis. It's like if you're baking a cake, you have to follow those steps. You mix the dough, and then you put all your ingredients, and then you put it in the oven, and then once out of the oven, you do the icing, and then you let it cool, blah 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 blah, like that. So you cannot start doing what? Icing before you finish what? Preparing the dough. No, and on like that. This is the most common technique or method that is used for developing systems or even working on projects. If you're building a house, you have to start with the foundation before you can do what? Lay the framework. And then once you finish the framework, you put the roof. Once you finish the roof, you can start working on the inside. Okay? So this is what's called the waterfall. It's very, very common. But there are other techniques that you can also use for doing that. Okay. So we have what's called the agile. So agile comes from the word flexibility. And with agile is whereby you break it down into small manageable pieces. Okay. So you can see the difference here is you have the phase, you have the time. And what you're saying is first planning is what you start with, then you go to analysis and then design. And they might overlap a little bit, but with the agile is what you call the iterative process. You break down the project in small manageable pieces. So if you're developing the software, Microsoft Word and you have all those different components, what you do is you first work with opening a file. Okay, so write the code for opening a file, and then once you finish that, you go to the piece for how to attach a file, and then you go to the piece for how to print a file. Okay, until you finish the whole project. So we have what you're calling the different iterations. You break down the project into small manageable pieces, and there's a little bit of information here about the different techniques that you can use to help you do that. So go a little bit through that. We have extreme programming, rapid application development, rational unified process, and on like that. So this is actually VSUSB major. This is a new concept that you have to be familiar with, agile software development, and there might be some questions in your job interview, and also you should be able to learn about how to use some of these techniques. Okay, I think we're gonna stop there unless there's any question.
No.
Okay, so in the next section, I'm going to briefly mention about project management, and I'll hopefully post a video online. So remember the assignments. If you finish the assignment early, that's good enough. If you have any issues, you can reach out. But if you wait until the last minute, that's you're doing yourself a big disservice. So I'll stop recording this, and if you have any questions that you don't want recorded, we can do